She was captured by Lakota warriors, but her heart was stolen by their prince. Eliza had never imagined that her journey west would change her life in such a sudden and unexpected way. She had grown up in a small settlement where the days were quiet and predictable. When the chance came to travel with a wagon group toward new land and a fresh start, she believed it was her opportunity to build a better future. She was not the loudest person in the group, but she had a steady spirit and a strong will. She listened more than she spoke, and she paid attention to the world around her. The journey across the wide plains was long and often tiring, but she held on to hope that something good waited at the end. The land they traveled through felt endless. Rolling grass stretched to the horizon, and the sky seemed larger than anything she had ever seen. Some days were peaceful, filled with the sound of wind moving through tall grass. Other days brought challenges like storms and rough paths. The travelers worked together, sharing tasks and helping one another. Eliza spent her time helping prepare meals, mending clothing, and keeping a watchful eye on the changing landscape. She was cautious by nature, and something about the quiet openness of the plains made her feel both free and uneasy. One afternoon, as the group moved slowly across a wide stretch of land, everything changed. Without warning, riders appeared in the distance. They moved quickly and with purpose, surrounding the wagon group before anyone had time to react. Fear spread through the travelers, and confusion filled the air. Eliza's heart raced as she tried to understand what was happening. She had heard stories of encounters on the plains, but she had never imagined she would be part of one. The riders were Lakota warriors, strong and serious, their presence commanding attention and silence. The moment was tense, and the travelers did not know what would happen next. Some people tried to stay calm while others held tightly to their belongings. Eliza stood still, unsure of what to do. She expected shouting or chaos, but instead, there was a quiet kind of control in the way the warriors moved. They spoke among themselves in a language she did not understand. Their expressions were focused, but not wild. They looked over the group carefully, as if making decisions without haste. After some time, they separated Eliza from the others. She felt a wave of fear as she realized she was being taken away. She did not know why she had been chosen, or what her future would be. Her mind raced with questions. Would she ever see the people from her wagon group again? Would she be able to return home? The uncertainty felt heavy, and yet she knew that panic would not help her. She forced herself to stay calm, even though her heart beat fast. As they led her away, she noticed that the warriors did not treat her with roughness. They watched her closely, but allowed her to walk on her own. The journey across the plains felt longer than any day before. The wind moved through the grass, and the sky slowly shifted colors as the hours passed. Eliza felt small under the vast open space. She wondered if this moment would define the rest of her life. Though she was afraid, she also felt a strange sense of curiosity about where she was being taken. After traveling for many hours, they reached a camp. It was not what she expected. Instead of a place filled with chaos, she saw families, children, and elders going about their daily routines. Fires burned gently, and people moved with purpose. There was a feeling of order and community. She was guided to a spot near one of the fires and given water. No one shouted at her or treated her with cruelty. She was watched carefully, but there was no harshness in their actions. Eliza sat quietly, observing everything around her. She noticed the way people worked together. Women prepared food and cared for children. Elders spoke calmly with one another. Young people practiced skills under the watchful eyes of experienced warriors. The camp felt alive with activity, but also peaceful in its own way. It was very different from what she had imagined. She realized she was not in chains or locked away. After that, she was being kept under watch, but she was not being harmed. A man who seemed to hold authority approached and spoke to others around him. Though she could not understand the words, she sensed he was a leader. His presence was strong but calm. He looked at her carefully, as if trying to understand who she was and what should be done. She lowered her gaze, unsure of how to respond. After a moment, he nodded slightly and stepped back. The decision about her future did not seem rushed. It felt as though they were taking time to consider what was right. As the day turned to evening, the sky filled with soft colors. Eliza sat near a small fire, trying to make sense of everything. She felt alone but not entirely hopeless. She realized that fear could not guide her actions if she wanted to survive. She needed to watch, listen, and learn. She needed to understand this new world, even if she did not know how long she would remain in it. While she sat quietly, she noticed a young man standing at a distance. He carried himself differently from the others. His posture was steady, and his expression was thoughtful. He seemed to observe everything without speaking much. Though he did not approach her, she felt his presence. There was something about him that stood out, a quiet strength that made others respect him. She wondered who he was and what role he played in the camp. The night grew darker, and the stars began to appear. The sky was filled with more stars than she had ever seen before. She looked up, feeling a mix of sadness and wonder. Somewhere far away, her old life continued without her. Yet here she was, in a place she had never expected to be. She did not know what tomorrow would bring. She did not know if she would be allowed to leave or if she would remain among these people. All she knew was that her story had taken a sudden turn. Despite her fear, a small part of her felt determined. She had always been someone who adapted when life became difficult. She knew she would need that strength now more than ever. The camp around her was quieting as people settled for the night. The sounds of soft voices and crackling fires filled the air. She realized that while she had been taken from her journey, she had also been given a chance to learn about a world she did not understand. As she lay down near the fire, she closed her eyes but did not sleep right away. Her thoughts moved between memories of her past and questions about her future. She wondered if she would ever feel at ease in this place. She wondered if the people around her would come to see her as more than a stranger. Most of all, she wondered what role the quiet young man in the distance might play in her story. The night felt long, but it also felt like the beginning of something she could not yet see clearly. Though she had been captured, she sensed that her journey was not over. It had simply changed direction. Somewhere within this new world, her path was waiting to unfold, and she would need courage to walk it. Morning arrived slowly over the wide plains, and the first light touched the camp with soft gold. Eliza woke before most people, unsure of where she should go or what she should do. For a few moments she stayed still, listening to the gentle sounds around her. She heard the crackle of a fire being stirred, quiet voices speaking in a language she did not yet understand, and the distant sound of footsteps moving across the grass. Everything felt calm, but she knew she was still in a place that was unfamiliar. She reminded herself to stay observant and patient. A woman approached her with a small bowl of food and a cup of water. The woman's face was serious but not unfriendly. She placed the items near Eliza and made a simple gesture that showed it was for her. Eliza nodded with gratitude, even though she was unsure if the woman understood. It was a small act of kindness, but it helped ease the heavy feeling in her chest. She realized that while she was still being watched, she was also being treated with care. That thought gave her a little strength. As the morning continued, the camp slowly came to life. Children ran and laughed, chasing one another between the shelters. Elders sat together speaking in calm voices. Some of the men prepared for the day's tasks, checking tools and speaking quietly with one another. Eliza noticed how everyone seemed to have a role. The camp worked like a living system, where each person contributed in some way. She wondered where she fit in, and whether she would be allowed to help. It was not long before she saw the young man she had noticed the night before. He walked through the camp with steady steps, greeting others with quiet respect. People looked at him with trust, and some spoke to him as he passed. There was something about the way he carried himself that showed he held responsibility. He was not loud or commanding, but his presence was strong. When his eyes met Eliza's, he paused for a moment. Then he walked toward her, calm and careful. He stopped a short distance away, making sure not to startle her. For a few seconds, neither of them spoke. Then he made a small gesture toward himself and said his name slowly. Eliza listened closely and repeated it as best she could. He nodded slightly, showing she had said it well enough. Then she said her own name, pointing to herself. He repeated it carefully as if wanting to remember it correctly. It was a simple exchange, but it felt important. It was the first real moment of connection she had experienced since arriving. Their conversation was slow and made up of small words and gestures. He spoke a few words in her language, though not many. She realized he must have learned them from traders or travelers. He pointed to the sky and said a word, then to the ground and said another. She understood he was trying to show her simple meanings. She followed along, repeating the words softly. It felt awkward at first, but also strangely comforting. Communication, even in small pieces, made the distance between them feel less wide. Over the next few days he returned often. Sometimes he brought small items like a piece of fruit, or showed her how to do simple tasks. He did not stay long each time, but his visits were consistent. Eliza began to understand that he was watching over her, making sure she felt safe. He never acted as if she were a burden. Instead, he treated her like someone worth patience and respect. That alone made her feel less alone. She learned that he was the son of a respected leader in the camp. Though he held an important place among his people, he did not act with pride. He listened carefully when others spoke and showed kindness to children and elders. Eliza noticed how people trusted him. They spoke to him with ease, and he responded with calm thoughtfulness. It made her feel that she could trust him too, even if they came from different worlds. As time passed, Eliza began to help with small tasks. At first, she only observed. She watched how the women gathered water and prepared meals. She saw how they worked together and supported one another. One day she offered to carry a small container of water. The women looked at one another, then nodded. They showed her where to walk and how to balance the weight. She followed carefully, determined not to make mistakes. When she returned with the water, one of the women gave a small smile. It was not a big gesture, but it meant a lot to her. The young man noticed her efforts. He saw that she was trying to understand rather than resist. One afternoon he sat near the fire where she was helping prepare food. He picked up a small stick and drew shapes in the dirt, pointing to objects and saying their names. She repeated them slowly. Sometimes she laughed at her own mistakes, and he gave a small, encouraging nod. Their lessons were quiet and simple, but they helped build a bridge between them. They began to share small stories as best they could. Eliza spoke about the place she had come from using simple words and gestures. She talked about long roads, wooden houses, and quiet evenings by a fire. He listened with interest, even when he did not understand every word. In return, he spoke about the land around them, pointing to the hills and sky as he described their importance. Though she did not know all the meanings, she felt the depth of his connection to the land and his people.
Their bond grew slowly.
There was no rush and no sudden change. It was built on small moments of trust. He respected her space and never forced conversation. She respected his role and never asked more than she should. Sometimes they simply sat near the fire in silence, watching the flames move. Those quiet moments felt just as meaningful as their conversations. Eliza noticed that some people in the camp watched her carefully. Not everyone felt certain about her presence. Some kept their distance, unsure of what her future might bring. She understood their caution. She knew she was an outsider and that trust could not come quickly. Instead of feeling discouraged, she chose to show respect through her actions. She helped where she could and stayed patient when she felt unsure. Over time, a few more people began to accept her presence. The young man seemed to understand the delicate balance. He spoke to others on her behalf, though she did not know the exact words. She could tell by his calm tone and steady manner that he was asking them to give her a chance. His support did not go unnoticed. It made her feel that she was not facing this new life alone. As days turned into weeks, Eliza found herself looking forward to their conversations. She began to feel a sense of calm when he was near. She admired the way he listened and the way he treated everyone with fairness. He, in turn, admired her courage and willingness to learn. Their connection was not loud or dramatic. It grew quietly, like a small fire that became steady over time. One evening they sat near the edge of the camp, watching the sun set across the plains. The sky turned shades of orange and pink, and the wind moved gently through the grass. They did not speak much, Words were still limited between them, yet the silence felt comfortable, not awkward. It was a shared moment of peace in a world that had once felt uncertain. Eliza realized that her fear had changed into something else. She was still unsure about her future, but she no longer felt completely lost. She had begun to understand the rhythm of life in the camp. She had begun to trust someone she never expected to meet. Though she did not know what tomorrow would bring, she felt stronger than she had before.
The young man stood after a while and gave a small nod before walking back toward the camp.
Eliza watched him go, feeling a quiet sense of connection. She knew their lives had crossed in an unexpected way. She did not yet understand how deeply their paths would become linked, but she could feel that this was only the beginning. As night fell and the stars appeared once more, Eliza sat by the fire and thought about how much had changed. She was still far from the life she once knew, but she was no longer alone in this new world. She had found a small sense of belonging, built through patience, kindness, and trust. And somewhere within the camp, the young man who had first approached her with quiet respect had become an important part of her story, even if neither of them had spoken about it yet. The days slowly turned into weeks, and the weeks began to feel less heavy for Eliza. At first, every morning had felt uncertain, like she was waking up inside someone else's life. Now, when she opened her eyes and saw the wide sky and the gentle smoke rising from the campfires, she felt a little less afraid. She still remembered the life she had left behind, but she no longer felt frozen by that memory. Instead, she focused on learning how to live in the place where she now stood. Life in the camp followed a rhythm that was steady and calm. The people moved with purpose, and each task had meaning. Eliza watched carefully and tried to follow along. She learned when to gather water and how to carry it without spilling. She learned how to help prepare simple meals and how to sit quietly when elders spoke. She paid attention to gestures and expressions, picking up small words each day. Even though she did not fully understand the language, she began to understand the tone and feeling behind it. The young man who had first approached her continued to check on her often. His presence had become something she quietly relied on. He did not hover over her or treat her like someone weak. Instead, he offered guidance in small ways. Sometimes he showed her how to complete a task more easily. Other times he simply stood nearby, making sure she felt safe. Their conversations grew a little easier as they learned more words from each other. They used gestures, drawings in the dirt, and patient repetition to communicate. One afternoon, he brought a small bundle of dried plants and showed her how they were used. He explained their purpose with simple words and careful gestures. Eliza listened closely, repeating the words and trying to understand. She realized that every object around them had a story and a use. Nothing was wasted. The land provided what people needed, and they treated it with respect. This idea felt new to her, but also meaningful. She found herself admiring the balance she saw in their way of life. As she spent more time in the camp, Eliza began to feel less like a stranger. Some of the women started including her in their daily work. They did not speak much to her, but they showed her what to do through actions. They demonstrated how to prepare food, how to mend simple items, and how to keep things organized. Eliza followed their lead carefully. When she made mistakes, they corrected her with calm gestures rather than harsh words. Slowly, she began to feel accepted in small ways. The young man noticed her efforts and seemed pleased. One evening, he sat with her near a quiet fire and pointed to the sky as the sun set. He spoke slowly, sharing the names of stars and the meaning they held for his people. Eliza listened, repeating the words and trying to remember them. She felt a sense of peace in those moments. The sky above them looked endless, and the world felt calm. Even though she still carried uncertainty about her future, she also felt a growing connection to this place. Their bond deepened through shared time rather than grand gestures. They did not need many words to understand each other's presence. Sometimes they walked a short distance from the camp and looked out over the land. He would point to the hills and rivers, explaining their importance. She would tell him about the roads and small towns she once knew. Though their stories were different, they both understood what it meant to search for a place to belong. However, not everything in the camp was easy. Eliza noticed that some people still watched her with caution. They did not speak against her openly, but their expressions showed uncertainty. She understood why. She came from a different world, and trust took time. She did not blame them for their caution. Instead, she chose to keep showing respect. She worked hard, listened carefully, and stayed patient. Over time, a few more people began to soften toward her. One day, a group of children approached her with curiosity. They stood at a distance at first, whispering among themselves. Then one of them stepped forward and pointed to an object she was holding, asking a question in their language. Eliza did not fully understand, but she smiled and showed them the item. The children laughed softly and tried to teach her a new word. She repeated it, and they clapped in delight. It was a simple moment, but it filled her with warmth. She realized that connection could grow in small, unexpected ways. The young man watched this from a distance and smiled faintly. He seemed to feel relief that she was beginning to find her place. Later that day he spoke with some of the elders. Eliza could not hear the words, but she saw the way they listened to him. His voice was calm and steady. He did not raise his tone or show frustration. He spoke with respect, and the elders responded thoughtfully. Though she did not know what was said, she sensed that he was speaking on her behalf. As the seasons began to shift, the air grew cooler. The camp prepared for the change with careful planning. Eliza helped gather supplies and organize items as she was shown. She felt proud to contribute, even in small ways. She was no longer just sitting and waiting. She was part of the daily rhythm. Each task she completed made her feel a little more confident. Her connection with the young man continued to grow. One evening as they sat near a fire, he tried to explain something important, using simple words and gestures. He spoke about responsibility, about caring for people and land. Eliza listened closely, trying to follow his meaning. She realized he carried the weight of future leadership. He was expected to guide and protect. This responsibility shaped the way he acted and spoke. She admired his calm strength and the way he handled pressure without showing anger. She also felt a quiet change in her own heart. At first, she had only wanted to survive and return home. Now she found herself wondering what home truly meant. The camp no longer felt like a place of fear. It felt like a place where she had learned and grown. She did not know what the future would bring, but she knew she had changed. She had become stronger, more patient, and more open to understanding others. Still, there were moments of uncertainty. Sometimes she would look out at the open plains and remember the road she had traveled. She wondered if the people from her wagon group had reached their destination. She wondered if they ever thought of her. Those thoughts brought a touch of sadness, but they no longer filled her with despair. She had found new purpose in the present moment. One evening, as the sky darkened and the first stars appeared, she and the young man walked a short distance from the camp. They sat on a small rise and watched the land stretch out before them. The wind moved gently through the grass and the air felt calm. He spoke a few words, then pointed to his chest and to the camp, as if explaining his connection to it. Then he pointed to her and made a similar gesture. Eliza understood that he was saying she had become part of this place too, in some way. She felt a quiet warmth at his words. Though their worlds had once been far apart, they had found common ground. Their bond was not built on sudden change, but on steady understanding. They had learned to trust each other through actions rather than promises. That trust felt strong and real. As they returned to the camp, Eliza realized how much had changed since the day she arrived. She had come with fear and confusion, unsure of what would happen. Now she walked with a sense of purpose and calm. She still faced uncertainty, but she no longer felt alone. She had found connection in a place she never expected. The night grew quiet, and the camp settled into rest. Eliza lay near the fire, looking up at the stars. She thought about the journey that had brought her here, and the people who had helped her along the way. Most of all, she thought about the young man whose quiet kindness had made this new life possible. She did not know what the future held for them, but she felt certain that their paths were now deeply connected. Somewhere in the distance, a soft breeze moved through the grass. The stars shone brightly overhead, and the world felt calm. Eliza closed her eyes with a sense of peace she had not felt in a long time. Her story was still unfolding, and she knew there would be challenges ahead. But she also knew she had found strength within herself and trust in someone who walked beside her. And with that, she drifted into sleep, ready to face whatever tomorrow would bring. The air grew cooler as the season slowly changed, and the camp began preparing for the coming months. Eliza noticed how everyone worked with quiet focus. Nothing felt rushed, but nothing was left undone. Each person seemed to know their role, and every task had a purpose. She joined in wherever she could, doing the smaller tasks she had learned over time. Carrying water, helping prepare food, and organizing simple items made her feel useful. She wanted to show that she respected the life she had been allowed to share. Even though she had found a sense of belonging, there was still a quiet tension she could feel at times. Some people in the camp had come to accept her presence, while others remained unsure. They were not unkind, but their watchful eyes reminded her that trust was something earned slowly. Eliza understood this. She knew she could not expect everyone to feel comfortable right away, so she kept her focus on helping, learning, and showing patience. The young man who had become such an important part of her days also seemed aware of this balance. He continued to treat her with calm respect and spoke to others on her behalf when needed. Eliza did not know all the details of those conversations, but she could sense that he was working to protect her place in the camp. He never acted as though it was a burden. Instead, he carried himself with steady determination, as if he believed that fairness and kindness would guide the right path. One morning, news reached the camp that brought a shift in the atmosphere. Travelers passing through the land had shared stories of growing tension in nearby areas. It was not clear what would happen, but the camp became more alert. People spoke quietly with one another, and preparations were made to ensure everyone's safety. Supplies were checked, and plans were discussed. Though there was no immediate danger, the sense of uncertainty was enough to make everyone cautious. Eliza felt a wave of worry. She wondered if her presence might create more difficulty during a time when the camp needed unity. She did not want to cause trouble for the people who had given her shelter and patience. Instead of letting fear guide her, she chose to help wherever she could. She stayed close to the women and elders, assisting with tasks and offering support. Her actions were simple, but they showed her willingness to stand with the community rather than apart from it. The young man noticed her efforts and seemed quietly grateful. One afternoon, he approached her and gestured toward a group of children who were playing nearby. He asked in simple words if she would help keep them calm and busy while others focused on their work. Eliza agreed immediately. She sat with the children, showing them small games and teaching them simple songs from her own past. The children responded with laughter and curiosity. Their joy lightened the mood, even in uncertain times. As the days passed, the camp remained watchful. Nothing serious happened, but the feeling of caution stayed. During this time, some people who had been unsure about Eliza began to see her in a different way. Nios's neighborhood. They noticed how she helped without being asked, and how she stayed calm even when things felt tense. She did not complain or demand anything. She simply offered what she could. Slowly, small signs of acceptance grew. A few more smiles appeared. A few more gestures of trust followed. Still, there were moments when the young man faced pressure. Some members of the camp questioned whether it was wise to place so much trust in someone from another world. They worried about the future and about the safety of their people. He listened to their concerns with respect. He did not dismiss their feelings. Instead, he spoke calmly about what he had observed. He explained that trust should be based on actions, and Eliza had shown patience, respect, and care. His words were steady, and his tone remained calm. Though not everyone agreed right away, his honesty carried weight. Eliza became aware that he was standing up for her, and the knowledge filled her with both gratitude and worry. She did not want him to face difficulty because of her. One evening she tried to express this concern to him using the simple words they shared. She pointed to him and then to the camp, showing that she understood his responsibility. Then she pointed to herself and made a small gesture as if asking whether she was causing trouble. He shook his head gently and placed his hand over his heart, then gestured toward her and the camp, together. His meaning was clear. He believed she belonged there and that standing by her was the right choice. That moment strengthened their bond even more. They understood each other without needing many words. Their trust had been built slowly, and now it was being tested. Yet neither of them stepped back. Instead, they continued to support one another in quiet ways. During one particularly busy day, the camp prepared for a gathering of nearby families. It was a time to share news, strengthen connections, and ensure everyone felt supported. Eliza helped prepare food and organize items for the gathering. She worked alongside others, following instructions carefully. When visitors arrived, she stayed near the group, offering help wherever it was needed. Some of the visitors looked at her with curiosity, but the people of the camp treated her as part of their own. That simple act made a deep impression on her. The gathering passed peacefully, and the shared time brought a sense of relief to everyone. Stories were exchanged and laughter returned to the camp. The tension that had hung in the air began to fade. People felt reassured by their unity and careful preparation. Eliza noticed how the mood shifted back to calm. The children played freely again, and the elders spoke with relaxed expressions. One evening after the gathering, Eliza and the young man walked to a quiet place just beyond the camp. The sky was filled with stars, and the air felt still. They sat on a small rise and looked out over the open land. He spoke slowly, using the words they both understood. He spoke about responsibility, about protecting what mattered, and about the importance of trust. Eliza listened carefully. She knew he carried the weight of future leadership, and she admired the way he handled it with calm strength. She shared her own thoughts as best she could. She spoke about fear, about feeling lost, and about finding strength through patience. She tried to express how much his support had meant to her. Though her words were simple, he understood the meaning behind them. They sat in silence for a while, letting the quiet of the night speak for them. Over time, the camp settled back into its steady rhythm. The tension that had once filled the air became a memory. People continued their daily tasks, and the sense of community remained strong. Eliza felt more at ease than she ever had before. She was no longer just trying to survive. She was living, learning, and growing alongside others. The young man's trust in her had helped others see her differently. Though not every doubt had vanished, there was now a foundation of understanding. Eliza knew she still had much to learn and many ways to prove her respect, but she also knew she was not alone in that effort. As another day ended and the camp grew quiet, she sat near the fire and thought about how far she had come. She remembered the fear she had felt when she first arrived and the uncertainty that had filled her heart. Now, though challenges remained, she felt stronger and more certain of her place. She had found support, friendship, and a growing sense of belonging. The stars above shone brightly, and the soft sounds of the camp surrounded her. She realized that her journey had not only been about survival, but it had been about trust, courage, and the willingness to open her heart to something new. And as she looked across the quiet camp and saw the young man speaking calmly with others, she felt a quiet hope for whatever the future might bring. The first light of morning painted the plains in soft gold, and the camp slowly began to wake. Eliza stirred from her sleep and looked around, noticing how familiar everything had become. The sounds of children laughing, elders speaking, and the quiet movement of people carrying out their daily tasks were no longer foreign to her. She felt a calmness she had never experienced when she first arrived. She realized that over time, this place had become more than a temporary home. It had become a part of her life. For weeks now, she had worked alongside others, learning their ways, helping with chores, gathering water, preparing food, and caring for the young and elderly. Each small action had built trust and connection. She had grown stronger, more patient, and more confident. But she also knew that there were still questions about her future. She had been accepted in the camp, yet she had not made a final choice about where her life would continue. The elders, respected for their wisdom, had watched her carefully. Their eyes were kind, yet they measured her actions with quiet attention. The young man Wikasa had been a constant presence through it all. His quiet guidance and steady patience had helped her navigate this new world. He never pressured her to do more than she could, but he encouraged her to be brave and to trust herself. She had come to admire his strength, not the strength of force, but the strength of calm thought, understanding, and fairness. He carried the responsibilities of his people lightly in his demeanor, but she could sense the weight of his role. His actions had taught her that true courage often required quiet patience rather than loud deeds. One afternoon, the elders called a gathering. Eliza felt a mixture of curiosity and nervousness. She knew this meeting was important. She observed the people around her as they prepared for the gathering, moving with quiet efficiency. Wakasa stood near her, offering a small nod of reassurance. His eyes held a steady calm that reminded her she had already earned respect through her actions. She drew a deep breath, prepared to face whatever decision the elders would make. The elders spoke slowly and carefully, discussing Eliza's place in the camp. They considered her behavior, her willingness to help, and her respect for their traditions. They spoke with thoughtfulness, weighing not only what she had done but also her potential for the future. Eliza listened with her heart pounding, unsure if the decision would allow her to stay. She watched the faces of the other people in the camp, seeing curiosity, cautious hope, and trust reflected in their eyes. After what felt like hours, the elders came to a decision. They recognized Eliza's strength, patience, and respect. They saw that she had not only adapted but had contributed to the life of the camp. The decision was clear. She could remain in the camp if she wished. Relief washed over her like a gentle wave. She had worked quietly and patiently, and now she had been given the gift of belonging. Wakasa approached her after the gathering. His expression was calm, yet there was a softness in his eyes that spoke louder than words. For a long moment, they simply looked at one another, understanding all that had happened between them without speaking. Then, using the simple words and gestures they had learned together, they shared a quiet conversation about what this decision meant. Eliza's heart felt lighter than it had in months. She realized that she had not only found safety, but had also found a place where she could grow, learn, and belong. In the days that followed, life returned to its steady rhythm. Eliza continued to help with daily tasks, but now she did so with a sense of purpose that went beyond survival. She worked not just because she needed to, but because she cared about the people around her. The children she had helped care for came to her often, laughing and playing. The women who had once observed her with caution now welcomed her presence and guidance. Even those who had been unsure about her slowly came to accept her as one of their own. Her bond with Wakasa grew stronger as well. They spent more time together walking along the plains, observing the land, and sharing stories. Words were still limited, but their understanding of one another had deepened. They no longer needed to explain everything with gestures or simple words. Sometimes, a glance or a smile was enough to communicate volumes. Eliza admired his wisdom, and he admired her courage and patience. Their relationship had grown naturally, built on mutual respect and shared experiences rather than sudden emotion. One evening, as the sun dipped below the horizon, they walked to a small hill overlooking the camp. The sky was painted in shades of orange and purple, and the plains stretched endlessly before them. Wakasa spoke slowly, pointing to the land and explaining its importance to his people. Eliza listened, repeating the words as best she could. She realized that the land itself held lessons of patience, balance, and respect. She understood that her life in the camp was now intertwined not only with the people, but also with the land they cared for. In return, she shared her own thoughts, speaking about the journey that had brought her here, about the fear and uncertainty she had felt, and about the small joys and connections she had discovered. Wakasa listened quietly, nodding, and sometimes speaking softly in words she was learning to understand. Together, they found comfort in each other's presence, knowing that their bond had been built through shared challenges and quiet support. Over time, the camp came to see Eliza not as an outsider but as a part of their community. Her presence had become familiar, valued, and trusted. She had shown through her actions that she cared deeply for the well-being of others. She had proven her courage and patience, and she had earned the respect of those who had once watched her with doubt. Her life had changed in ways she could never have imagined, and she had discovered strength within herself she had not known existed. Eliza and Wakasa spoke openly about their future together, They knew it would not always be easy, but they understood that trust, respect, and patience would guide them. They wanted to build a life together that honored both their worlds, the past she had left behind and the present she had embraced. They chose a path of partnership, each supporting the other as they faced whatever challenges might come. As months passed, the camp continued its daily life, and Eliza found joy in the simple routines and in the connections she had built. She no longer feared the unknown. Instead, she faced each day with quiet confidence and purpose. She knew that life was full of uncertainty, but she had learned that courage, kindness, and patience could guide her through it. At night, she often sat by the fire, watching the flames dance and listening to the soft sounds of the camp. She thought about the journey that had brought her here, the challenges she had faced, and the people who had helped her along the way. Most of all, she thought about Wakasa, whose quiet strength and steady support had shown her that connection and trust could grow even in the most unexpected places. The stars above shone brightly, reflecting the vastness of the land and the endless possibilities of the future. Eliza felt a deep sense of peace. She had come to a place she had never imagined, and yet it had become home. She had found courage, friendship, respect, and love. Her heart, once filled with fear and uncertainty, now carried hope and determination. Together, Eliza and Wakasa looked out over the open plains, knowing that their lives were now intertwined. They understood that challenges would come, but they also understood that they could face them together. Their journey had begun with fear, but it had grown into something far greater: trust, respect, and the promise of a shared future. The camp, the people, and the land had welcomed her, and she had embraced them in return. She had discovered that even when life changes in ways we cannot predict, patience, courage, and understanding can lead to new beginnings. And as the night settled around the camp, Eliza closed her eyes with a sense of peace and hope, ready to face the future she had chosen to build, side by side with Wakasa. Her story, which had begun with fear and uncertainty, had become one of belonging, trust, and quiet love. And in the endless plains under the vast sky, she had found a place she could finally call home.